Hello, and welcome back to Nevermore. I am Lafayette Faust, the town's historian, and I tell the stories of the good folks who choose to stand against the evil forces that have invaded this otherwise beautiful coastal town. Tonight, I will introduce you to Keri, a woman with no memory beyond the moment she wakes in a mansion occupied by one of the most twisted souls we've ever encountered in Nevermore. Keri's memory slowly returns as she runs for her life. And when she finally decides to stop running from the evil that pursues her and to fight, she receives a revelation that warps her mind and shocks her to the core. This story is ultimately a story of redemption. And aren't those the stories that really matter the most? What Keri will discover is that we mortals are not capable of creating our own redemption, no matter how hard we try, because we are all tainted by an evil that began its war on humanity a long time ago. And because we are tainted, we can never devise a perfect solution for self-redemption. So with that seed planted deep into the soil of your mind, I invite you to sit back, turn on a light, and prepare yourself. She opened her eyes knowing only two things. Her name was Keri Bramlett, and she deserved to die. She was groggy, her vision fuzzy, her mouth desert dry. She was lying on a couch in a dimly lit room, and when she pushed herself up into a sitting position, she realized that she was dressed in a white button-down and a black business suit. "Where am I?" she thought. She tried to stand, but her head swam, and she lost her balance. She fell back onto the couch and took long breaths to clear her mind so that she could understand what was happening to her. After a few moments, she felt better, not so dizzy. Still sitting on the couch, she looked around the room. There was a desk with a laptop, a chair, shelves with books, pictures, knickknacks. It was an office. From the look and feel of it, a home office. The desk sat near a large window that looked out into a night so black that it seemed as if she were looking into a void. The couch and two club chairs sat in front of a sleek coffee table. They were arranged in the center of the room in such a way that would facilitate a meeting. She knew the room was furnished in mid-century modern, and she knew that she liked the clean lines of the desk and the furniture. I spent a lot of money on this office. The thought struck her as odd. So this is my office? My home? She stood again from the couch. There was some lingering wooziness, but it passed quickly, and she stepped across the room to the door which led into a hallway. She had the idea that walking through the house might help her understand what was happening. The hallway was wide, with bright art pieces on the light-colored walls. The floor was expensive hardwood. To her left, the hallway carried on for about 40 feet, then turned to the right. There were 4 doors down this side of the hallway, 2 on each side. To her right, the hall ended at the head of a sleek staircase. She decided to explore the doors on her left, opening all 4 doors and peering inside. 3 were spacious bedrooms, the 4th a bathroom. She stepped inside and splashed some cold water on her face. She took a moment to look in the mirror. She appeared to be in her mid-30s. She had shoulder-length brown hair and green eyes. She was in good shape and seemed to be in good health. She exited the bathroom and followed the hall to the head of the stairs. She looked down onto a large room with an open floor plan. A huge kitchen and a spacious living area were also furnished with mid-century modern flair. Everything was sleek and expensive. One wall was a massive window. It also looked out into a night so dark she felt as if the house were floating through the vastness of space. She could not see the whole downstairs from her vantage point simply because the house was enormous. This is my mansion, she thought. I'm successful. I'm wealthy. I had this house built in the architectural style of a Frank Lloyd Wright. It's beautiful, and I don't deserve any of it. She stood at the top of the stairs, wondering why she should have such negative thoughts about herself. After a moment, she said aloud, I live alone, and she knew it to be true. She turned, stepped back into the office, and took a seat at her desk. She felt better, her mind now clear, and she thought that maybe there would be something on the computer that would help her regain her memory. The laptop was open. The desktop background was a radiant garden in the center of a forest. Golden rays of light pierced through the tree branches and fell onto the brightly colored flowers. I want to be in that garden, full of peace, she thought. But I don't deserve peace. Again, she was curious as to why she seemed to hate herself. She wondered why she did not deserve to be at peace in a beautiful garden full of wildflowers. She didn't feel any specific guilt about an act she may have committed. In fact, she had no memory of anything prior to her waking up on the couch. So, why should she have this idea in her mind that she did not deserve peace? And as she further considered her situation, she wondered why she had awakened with the feeling that she deserved death. That idea alone suggested that she had done something deserving of punishment, and furthermore, that the punishment was imminent. She began to grow concerned. Who am I? Do I have amnesia? Or have I been drugged? I know that this is my home, and I seem to be physically okay, other than the memory loss, which may resolve itself. I don't feel threatened. Did I drink too much? Do I even drink? It was clear that she would not find anything on the computer. There were no personal files whatsoever. There were no pictures or documents. There was only one icon displayed on the desktop. It was for a messaging app. She opened it, hoping to find messages that would enlighten her as to who she was and maybe explain her amnesia. There were no messages. The desk was a sleek glass design with no drawers, and there were no personal items sitting on it other than the computer. There were framed documents on the walls and pictures displayed on the shelves to her left. She stood and looked at the first document hanging on the wall. It was a framed degree from Harvard University's School of Genetic Engineering. Another framed document was a degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They both had her name, Keri Bramlett. She walked over to the framed photos on the bookshelves. The first was of her, standing in what appeared to be a laboratory, wearing a white coat. She was smiling as she shook the hand of a regal-looking man in a suit. Though she could not recall the meeting, she recognized the man as the President of the United States. The second photo was of her standing in front of a huge crowd of well-dressed people. The photo triggered a powerful memory. That's me when I won the Nobel Prize for genetic research. It was the greatest day of my life, the day I was recognized for my success. She noticed that 3 books were prominently displayed on one of the shelves. All 3 were related to genetic research, and she had written them. Instead of feeling pride for these amazing accomplishments, she felt the sharp barb of shame. What is wrong with me? Why am I not thrilled at these revelations about myself? The computer emitted a soft chime, pulling her from her thoughts. She stepped back to the desk and took a seat. She had received a message. She clicked on the app, and a window popped up. The message was 5 words. I want to be happy. Hoping that whoever had sent the message would be able to help her understand what was happening, she replied, Who is this? The reply chilled her. I can't kill myself. What does that mean? She said aloud after reading the message. Her pulse quickened. She typed, Is this some sick joke? It's not funny. The next reply was even more disturbing. I have to kill you instead. I'm not playing this game, she said aloud and pushed herself up from the desk. Her mind raced through everything she knew so far. She was a scientist, a successful one. She was an author and Nobel Prize winner. She had met the President of the United States. She woke up in her mansion with amnesia and overwhelming guilt. And now some psycho was trying to scare her with disturbing messages. What does it all mean? She said aloud, trying to order her thoughts and make sense of it all. She heard a door open and shut. It came from downstairs. It sounded like someone had come through the front door. Her heart raced. Her mind jumped from one thought to another. She couldn't recall anything about her life other than what had been revealed to her in this office. But she knew one thing to be absolutely accurate. She lived alone. So, who had just entered her home? Was it a friend who might be able to help her regain her memory? Or was it the psycho who sent her the creepy messages? She glanced around the room for something to use for protection. Her eyes fell on the various knickknacks on the shelves. One was an obelisk, about 1.5 feet long. It looked heavy and had a pointed tip. She snatched it up and crept into the hallway, straining to hear. She heard nothing. No footsteps. No breathing. No evidence of anyone moving about. She tiptoed to the head of the stairs and peeked down into the spacious living room. A woman stood in front of the door, wearing a vintage-style nurse's uniform, the type that was worn in the 1940s and 50s. The short dress was hospital green, over which draped a wide apron. Instead of wearing the appropriate vintage-style shoes to match the outfit, she wore black combat-style boots. Her clothing alone would have made the woman look completely out of place standing in such a modern home. But the woman also wore a mask. It was strange and completely incongruous with her outfit. It was a bright yellow smiley face, worn over a black balaclava that completely covered her head. The curious yet disturbing look was topped off with a vintage nurse's cap. The silly mask, combined so incongruently with the vintage outfit and boots, should have caused Keri no alarm. In fact, under normal circumstances, she might have chuckled at its absurdity. However, the nurse held in her right hand a stainless steel Satterley bone saw. It was a wicked-looking instrument, used to saw through human bone during amputation. It had a ring handle that resembled the grip of a Derringer pistol, and it had a wide 13-inch blade lined with tiny sharp teeth that could be used to either saw or hack. The nurse was looking down at the floor, unaware that Keri was spying on her from the top of the stairs. Keri's heart slammed against her rib cage. Then she was struck with the most curious thought. The vintage-style nurse's uniform was derived from a nun's habit and represents purity. Keri couldn't explain why, but this seemed to be an important piece of information. She glanced down at the obelisk and realized it would be ineffective against the ghastly saw. What am I going to do? Just then, the nurse raised her head and looked directly at Keri, causing her blood to freeze. Then the nurse spoke, and it was clear that she was using some technology to distort her voice. Instead of sounding feminine, the voice was dark and thick and robotic.
I deserve to be happy,
she said. Keri felt a surprising surge of anger that made her want to stand and fight. It mingled with her terror, which told her to run and hide. The result was that she was unable to decide which scenario was the better, which scenario would keep her alive the longest. So she simply stood, wide-eyed, as if she were a mouse mesmerized by the swaying of a cobra.
"I can't be happy while you live,"
the nurse said. Finally, Keri was able to speak. She wanted to sound bold and commanding. What came out was timid and fearful. This is my house. Leave, or I'll call the police." The nurse gave a laugh, made only more disturbing due to the voice distortion.
"You'll be dead before they get here. Besides, you don't have a phone."
Damn, Keri thought. Then, how does she know I don't have my phone? Where is my phone? Then she asked, "Why are you doing this?" The nurse paused before answering.
"I've come to bring us both what we want. You need to be punished, and I want to be happy."
Keri was shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. She didn't understand how this woman could know that she felt so much guilt. "You're not making any sense. I've done nothing to you. I don't know who you are. Please leave. I won't press charges if you just go now." Instead of answering, the nurse began walking toward the stairs. Keri's breath caught in her throat. Then, knowing that she would not be able to use the obelisk to save herself, she ran. The nurse stopped at the foot of the stairs and watched as Keri ran down the hallway. Then, with confident deliberation, she began walking up the steps. Keri allowed herself to give in to the wise counsel of her terror to flee. However, she knew she had to cling to her righteous anger. It would help keep her wits about her so she could find a weapon, a solution, a way to call for help, or to safely get away from the nurse. She had been in the bathroom and knew it offered no other way out except for a window. That seemed to be out of the question because she was on the second floor. She had only glanced inside the 3 bedrooms, seeing that they were empty. She had not checked to see if there was anything that could be used as a weapon. She darted inside the first room. It was large, with a king-size bed, nightstands, and a sitting area. She ran over to the nightstands and rummaged through. Nothing. She could hear the slow, deliberate steps as the nurse walked up the stairs. She rummaged through a dresser and found a pair of scissors. They would be only moderately better than the obelisk. But she snatched them anyway and turned her attention to the closet door. She had a flash of memory. This was a large walk-in closet. She ran over and pulled open the door and flicked on the switch, turning on the lights. "Oh, no," she said. The closet was 20 feet by 20 feet. It contained men's clothes and shoes and various accessories. What shocked her was the man lying bound and gagged on the floor. He was awake, and his eyes shot wide upon seeing her. He tried to speak through the gag, urgently shaking his head. A memory flashed through her mind. It was of her and this man having a romantic dinner on a balcony, with candlelight and the smell of jasmine in the air. His smile was wide and confident, the flickering of the candlelight making his eyes shine with affection. He pushed a small, ornate box across the table toward her. She opened it, and it contained an engagement ring. His name popped into her head, along with a pang of guilt. Jensen? She remembered that he sometimes stayed over, and she had allowed him to use this closet to keep some of his belongings. His eyes narrowed. He continued to speak over the gag as he tried to break free of the rope that secured him. She rushed over to him and moved to use the scissors to cut him free. He flinched and yelled behind the gag. "Be still," she said, her own breath coming in rapid gasps. "I'm being chased by a woman in a mask. I think she's going to kill me. I need your help." The scissors were sharp, and she quickly cut the rope. Jensen pushed her aside, shot up off the floor, and ran into the bedroom. "Get away from me!" he yelled. Keri was stunned. She had just cut him free, and he treated her as if she were a terrible person. At this thought, another pang of guilt shot through her. Did she turn down his proposal? Is that why he was acting this way? And then, how did he get tied up and locked inside the closet? Was it the same person who drugged me? Did the nurse do this to us? If so, why wait until now to show up in that stupid costume and try to kill us? Why didn't she just do it when she drugged me? Is there more than one person involved in this? These thoughts raced through her mind as she watched Jensen twirl around in the bedroom, eyes wide, clearly afraid, looking for a weapon and a way out. She stood and rushed out of the closet into the bedroom. "Jensen, please, tell me what's happening. I can't remember anything before waking up in my office about 30 minutes ago. Can you tell me what's happening?" "Get away from me," Jensen said. Not finding a weapon, he headed for the hallway. "Wait!" she yelled. "The nurse! She's got a saw!" Jensen stepped through the door and into the hallway. He turned right and stopped dead in his tracks, a look of confusion and abject fear on his face. From her vantage point, Keri could see only him framed in the doorway. Then, the nurse stepped forward and brought the bone saw down onto Jensen's head. A spray of blood shot across the wall in the brightly colored art pieces. Jensen fell to his knees, his mouth working but no words slipping out. The nurse tried to pull the bone saw free, but it was stuck. She grabbed the handle with both hands, put her right boot on his chest, and wrenched. Keri screamed, but saw that her only chance of getting out of the room was running past the carnage before the nurse could free her blade. She shot out the door, swiping ineffectively at the nurse with the scissors as she rushed past. The nurse made no sound, only continued wrenching the blade from Jensen's head, spraying more blood on the walls, the floors, and on her white apron. The nurse blocked the way to the stairs, so Keri ran left. When she reached the end of the hallway, she turned right down the connecting hall, which was 60 feet long. She remembered that it served to connect two separate wings of the house, one containing the living room, kitchen, and bedrooms to a separate and just as spacious wing of the home that contained a large library, lounge, and indoor swimming pool. Keri could hear the nurse's voice echo behind her.
"I'm going to kill you. It's the only way that I can be happy."
Then she heard the meaty thud as the nurse finally wrenched the saw free and Jensen's body hit the floor. Keri ran from the hallway into the second wing. To her right was the entrance to the library, filled with thousands of books, and to her left was the lounge, complete with a wet bar, handcrafted pool table, antique jukebox, couches, and chairs. She glanced over her shoulder and could see the nurse had not yet reached the turn in the hallway behind her, though she could hear the footsteps getting louder. She had only a heartbeat to decide which direction to go, and decided that the lounge would be her best bet. "There are pool cues in there, and I can use one as a club." She ran into the room, making her way to the wall mount holding the cues. A woman scrambled in a crouch from behind the wet bar and ran toward Keri, holding a traditional corkscrew, the kind with an ornate wooden handle and a steel helix ending in a sharp point, high above her head, ready to strike. Keri turned toward the woman, who was dressed in a black and white maid's uniform. Her eyes were wild, and her hair was a frizzy nest, matted on the scalp with sticky blood. Her hands in uniform were also blood-splattered. The maid screamed. It was full of rage and wicked intent. Keri had only a heartbeat to react, throwing up her arm in defense. The maid slammed the corkscrew down, driving the sharp tip into her right forearm. Keri screamed as the corkscrew pierced the flesh and tore into the tissue between her radius and ulna. She yanked her arm back in pain, wrenching the corkscrew from the maid's hand. She slapped at the deranged woman with her left hand, smacking her across the face hard enough to momentarily disorient her. Keri's eyes filled with tears of pain. She fell back onto the pool table, rolled across it, and off the other side, putting the table between her and the crazy-assed maid. She grabbed the corkscrew handle, steeled herself, and groaned in pain as she yanked it from her arm. The maid grabbed a bottle of champagne from the bar and smashed it against the pool table. She pointed the jagged end of the broken bottle at Keri and said, "I'll kill you for what you did, you sick bitch!" "I don't know what you're talking about," Keri said. Her heart pounded. Her arm ached as blood seeped from the wound. She wiped tears from her eyes. "I woke up a few moments ago with amnesia. I don't know what's happening. Are you with the nurse?" The maid's face contorted into confusion. Then she shot a crazy-eyed look at the door. "Oh, my God. I understand. I get it. It's unbelievable, insane, but it's true. The nurse, is she here? Shit. We're all going to die." Keri had originally thought that the maid was helping the nurse, but she could see from the abject fear in the woman's eyes at the mention of the nurse that this was not the case. "Who is she? Did she hurt you? She killed my fiancé." The maid turned her wild eyes back on Keri. "It's you," she said. "It's you. Don't you see? You killed Jensen, and you will kill us all." Keri had no idea what the poor woman was rambling on about. The thought struck her that maybe her mind had snapped, leaving her delirious. Just then, the nurse spoke from the doorway in her dark, robotic voice.
I've been looking for you,"
she said, looking at the maid.
"I thought you had slipped outside, you sneaky little bitch. But here you are. That makes me happy."
Keri could see the maid's pulse pounding in her neck. "Let's team up," Keri said. "We can overpower her." The maid looked from Keri to the nurse, confusion on her face. "No," she said. "No. I don't know what's going on here, but please leave me alone. Please let me live. I won't tell anybody what I've seen here." The nurse stepped from the doorway into the lounge. The bone saw gleamed in a beam of light from one of the bulbs recessed in the ceiling. The yellow mask, with its happy little smile, seemed so out of place, so surreal under the circumstances. The maid stepped back, trying to position herself in such a way that the pool table remained between her and Keri, while keeping one of the couches between her and the nurse.
"You've seen too much,"
the nurse replied.
"You have to die."
The maid tore her eyes from the nurse and looked at Keri. "Please, let me live. I promise I won't tell. I promise." Keri strained to understand why the maid was as afraid of her as she was the nurse. She could not recall the woman's name, let alone anything she might have done to cause her such terror. "She's going to kill me too," Keri said. "Help me overpower her." The maid shook her head back and forth, the confused, terrified look on her face. "This is a sick game you're playing, and I hope you burn in hell." With that statement, the maid scrambled over the pool table and slashed at Keri with the broken bottle. Keri jumped back. The jagged edges of the bottle barely missed carving into her stomach. She snatched a pool cue from the wall and swung it around, whacking it against the maid's cheek. The maid screamed in pain and fell to her knees. The nurse sprung into action, jolting toward Keri and the maid. Keri ran around the table as the nurse ran up and sliced the wide blade across the maid's neck, severing the carotid and slicing into vertebrae. Blood sprayed. The maid gurgled, her head dangling back, and fell to the floor. Keri saw her chance and shot across the lounge and through the doorway. She ran to the library and slammed the door shut behind her. She turned the lock on the doorknob and ran deeper into the spacious room, looking for anything she could use as a weapon other than the pool cue, which she still carried. Books, chairs, a couple tables, desks, some expensive statuettes, but no weapon of any kind. There was a door at the far side of the room. A flash of memory. It led to a set of stairs leading down to the main floor and the indoor pool. Maybe there she would find a weapon. The nurse jiggled the handle of the locked door.
This is making me sad. Stop resisting. I need to kill you.
Keri didn't reply, but she had an idea. She ran to the door leading downstairs. She pushed the door open, hoping to create the ruse that she had run down to the pool. Then she ran to an ornate desk that sat in front of a large window. She ducked down behind the desk. The nurse used the bone saw to start hacking away at the door. It took only a moment for her to cut a hole in the door that was big enough for her to reach through and turn the lock. She pushed open the door and stepped inside.
This makes me sad.
Keri was too scared to peek, too terrified not to. There was a gap under the desk, about 2 inches, and she carefully, quietly crawled close enough to peer under it. At first, she could only see the nurse's black combat boots. Then, with careful maneuvering, she was able to see all of the nurse. She was splashed in gore, and her yellow smiley mask was smeared with sticky blood. I want to smash that damn creepy-ass mask through her freaking face, Keri thought. Then, for the first time, Keri had a horrible realization. I'm going to have to kill her. That's the only way I survive this. Up to that moment, Keri had been running for her life, not completely able to think through this ordeal. She had been operating with the idea that she could find a weapon to defend herself, maybe subdue the nurse or scare her off. But now she realized that would not be the case. She was going to have to kill or be killed. The nurse looked at the open door leading down the stairs but did not move toward it. She simply continued to stand in the room. Keri could see that she was listening, not completely bought into the idea that she had fled to the pool.
I hear you,
the nurse said.
I'm going to find you, and I'm going to cut you into tiny little pieces.
Keri's breath caught in her throat. Her heart raced. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream, and she also wanted to rage. She glanced at the pool cue that she had laid on the floor behind her, careful to keep it out of sight. Screw it, she thought. I'm going to bash her damn face in. She reached back and grabbed the stick, took 2 calming breaths, and prepared to rush from behind the desk and attack the nurse, knowing that there was little hope she would survive. Just as she was about to move, a man stepped from behind one of the bookshelves. He was dressed in coveralls. The patch on his chest declared his name was Steve. He was the gardener. He clearly had been hiding from the nurse, but when he held up his hands, he was holding a Japanese gardening sickle. It had a long wooden handle and a sharp 7-inch blade. The nurse turned her attention on Steve.
Oh, this makes me happy,
she said, and moved toward him, raising her bone saw, preparing for attack. Steve's voice shook when he said, I don't want to hurt you, boss, but I will. I'll protect myself. I'll kill you. Keri was thankful that Steve was a distraction, but she was confused as to why he referred to the nurse as boss. She did not have the time to ponder this, because as the nurse moved toward Steve, Keri was presented with a difficult choice. She had a clear line to either the door leading to the pool or back through the door that led to the main wing of the house. The pool room might present her with a weapon, or it might not. The main wing contained the kitchen, where there was surely a selection of large knives that she could choose from. Her third option was to help Steve. If she ran now, the nurse would surely have to kill him before resuming her chase. She wanted to run, to put as much distance between her and the nurse as she could. Run and try to find a way out of the house, maybe a garage, get in the car and race off to safety. But she knew that leaving Steve to fight this murderous freak by himself was something she could not live with. So, she decided to stop being a victim. She decided to fight. Surely he heard me run into the room and lock the door, Keri thought. There's no way he missed that, so he knows someone else is here in the lounge with him. If I make my move, I can run up behind the nurse while she is focused on him and bash her brains out with this pool cue. If he's smart, he'll know I'm helping, and maybe the two of us can kill this crazy bitch. She waited until the nurse walked past the desk. Then she quietly stood, pool stick in hand, and steeled herself for her attack. She hoped like hell that Steve would understand her plan and react accordingly. However, when Steve caught sight of her, his mouth fell open in complete shock. "It's you?" he asked, his eyes darting from her to the nurse. The nurse turned to follow Steve's gaze. Keri sprung into action. Steve did not move. He stood with mouth open, seeming to be in complete shock. Keri swung the pool stick. Instead of moving away from Keri, the nurse stepped toward her, closing the gap and effectively stepping inside her swing, making her attack less effective. Keri had a flash of memory, learning that same exact move in a martial arts class. The nurse was fast, but not fast enough. The pool stick caught her across the back with enough force to elicit a groan and a sharp hiss. Though in pain, the nurse kept her wits about her. She used her left hand to grab the stick, and she brought the bone saw down with her right hand, severing the stick in half. Keri dropped to the floor and rolled under the blade as the nurse brought it back around in a wicked slice. As Keri dropped, the blade sliced a thin cut into her right shoulder. Keri rolled away from the nurse and pushed herself back up in a crouch, surprised she knew such a move. Steve suddenly came out of his stupor and awkwardly lunged at the nurse, raising the sickle high. The nurse was too fast for Steve. Holding the bone saw at her waist, she stepped forward as she simultaneously thrust the blade, using all her body's energy to plunge it into Steve's stomach. His eyes shot wide, and blood spilled from his stomach over the nurse's hands. He dropped the sickle and fell to his knees. The nurse pulled the blade from his stomach and used the edge with 100 jagged teeth to hack away at him. Blood splattered on the floor and sprayed onto the neatly lined books on the shelves. He gurgled and screamed as he fell to the floor. The nurse laughed as she hacked away. Even though her voice was distorted by whatever technology she was using behind that wretched smiley face mask, Keri could distinctly hear the glee. The nurse was having fun. Keri realized that she was missing an opportunity to flee, and she turned and ran through the door leading down to the pool. She did not attempt to shut the door behind her because it would only serve to slow her down as she fled. As she ran down the stairs, she could hear the sickening sound of the blade hacking into flesh and bone. And she also heard the laughter of the nurse as she set about her gleeful slaughter. Keri lost her footing, nearly fell, but regained her balance and stepped into the large room containing the pool. The only light came from the lights in the pool, and they cast upon the walls and windows a soft blue glow with undulating shadows. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a look out into the night. She was not able to see much because of the sheer darkness. Keri ran to the glass door that led to an outside patio. It was locked. She glanced around and found nothing to safely break any of the glass. Then, She remembered that she had installed shatter-resistant glass as a safety measure. She squinted through the glass into the night and saw that the house sat on a hill that looked out on what must be 100 acres of field, lined by deep black forest. Even if she could get out of the house, she was still completely alone. She heard footsteps on the stairs. She turned from the glass and saw a door at the foot of the stairs that led into the bottom floor of the long hallway that connected the two wings of the house. She knew that this would take her back to the first wing, where the living room and kitchen were located. She ran to the door, flung it open, and stepped inside. She shut the door behind her and turned the lock on the knob. As she ran down the hall, which was covered in expensive wallpaper with geometric patterns, she had a sudden flash of memory. There was a secret door somewhere in this hallway, cleverly hidden by the wallpaper's geometric design. She could not remember where it led, but if she were correct and it did exist, then maybe she could get to it before the nurse broke through the door into the hallway. This might be her salvation. How can I do this before that crazy bitch sees me? She closed her eyes, forcing herself to remember. She couldn't focus. Her mind raced. She could hear the thud of the nurse's boots as she slowly walked down the stairs. She clasped her hands over her ears, shut her eyes, and pushed her fear deep, clearing the way for the memory to rise to the top. She could still hear the thud of the nurse's boots. Then, nothing as the nurse reached the bottom of the stairs. She was now standing in the pool room. No, don't think about the nurse. Push it down, open your mind. Then she remembered. It was halfway down the hall on her right. She ran. The nurse jiggled the door handle behind her. Keri stopped where she remembered the hidden door to be and ran her hands along the wall, looking for a way to push it open. The nurse began chopping away at the door. Keri knew she only had a minute, maybe less, to find the hidden switch. She grew frantic and fought to keep her mind as clear as possible. Where's the hidden switch? It has to be here. Why can't I remember? A piece of the door splintered with a crack. Keri glanced and saw the sharp tip of the bone saw had poked through. It was covered in congealed blood. Think. How do I get this damn door open? The nurse wrenched the blade, working it free from where it was stuck in the door. When she gets the blade free, she'll be able to look through. I need to get this door open before she can peek through. The door splintered. The nurse was able to pull the blade back just a fraction of an inch. Time was running out. Then the solution popped into Keri's mind. The door was voice activated, and she remembered the words she needed to use to open it. Shiva, she said. She heard the locking mechanism turn behind the wall, and the door slid aside. It was accompanied with a swish of air, releasing 2 more memories. The hidden room has negative air pressure. Then, that's because it's a laboratory. She stepped inside and the door slid shut. Her ears popped as the room beyond adjusted back to its normal regulated air pressure. As the secret door locked, automatic lights flickered on, revealing that she was standing in an elevator. There were only 2 buttons on the control panel beside the door in front of her. She pushed the button that led down. The elevator descended 50 feet. When it stopped, the doors slid open, and she stepped into a large room, 50 feet by 50 feet, that was dimly lit with recessed light fixtures. She stood for a moment, confused, trying to make sense of it all. And then the memories began to pop in her head in rapid succession. I own a company that conducts genetic research. I won the Nobel Prize for the work I've done. The company is worth billions, and I employ thousands, but this is my personal lab where I do... What? That last thought escaped her, but she felt that whatever it was she worked on here was very personal and extremely important to why she had woken up feeling such profound guilt. She temporarily forgot about the nurse, Jensen, the maid, and the gardener. Instead, she felt as if she were on the verge of some profound understanding. She intuited that this knowledge was dark and twisted. She feared that what she was about to discover, the memories it would trigger, would be soul-crushing. Then, a thought struck her that covered her in yet another ominous chill. I'm about to find out why the nurse needs to kill me to be happy. She stepped forward and the laboratory lights brightened. There were tables filled with various instruments suited for genetic research. There were DNA sequencers, a mass spectrometer, computers, and 2 standalone refrigerator units with glass doors. Inside were dozens of petri dishes and vials containing fluids of various colors. To her right were 3 steel tables. The middle table contained a body covered with a blood-stained sheet. Beyond the tables, located in the wall, was a cremation chamber. Guilt swept over her. It was intense, nearly debilitating, causing her knees to weaken, her heart to ache. Nausea squirmed in the pit of her stomach, and bile burned her throat as she struggled to stop herself from vomiting. What terrible things have I done in this lab? She wanted to turn and flee this room, even if it meant getting murdered by the nurse. But she felt compelled to examine the body, knowing it was instrumental in understanding what was happening to her. She willed herself to turn toward the elevator and make her way back upstairs. But she found herself taking a step forward to the body instead. She fought the urge to move any closer, but felt her feet moving. Then, after 6 laborious steps, she stood over the body. The sheet was white and smeared with large crimson stains. She reached with trembling hands and slowly pulled the sheet down, revealing the face of the corpse beneath. Keri began to shiver. Her mind went completely numb at what lay on the table. What she saw did not make any sense, yet she knew there was some profound revelation to be had. She was completely in shock, so much so that she did not hear the elevator doors swish open, nor did she hear the thud of the boots as the nurse stepped into the lab behind her. Keri looked down at the body on the table and saw her own face. I don't understand. Am I hallucinating? What does this mean?
You weren't supposed to find this lab,
the nurse said.
You weren't supposed to remember. You were only supposed to feel the guilt.
The corpse was covered in cuts and stabs and bruises, the worst of which was a ghastly wound to the left side of the head. Keri turned to face the nurse, who stood a few feet in front of the elevator doors. Blood dripped from the saw that she held at her side. Bits of flesh and gore stuck to her uniform, and a bloody handprint was smeared across her yellow smiley mask, presumably from where Steve had attempted to defend himself as she had hacked away at him. Keri felt weary, weak, overwhelmed. She closed her eyes, but the grisly image of the nurse remained. Before you kill me, I need to understand. Why do I feel such guilt? Is that my twin on the table? Why are you doing this? The nurse tilted her head in a gesture of curiosity. She pointed to the corpse.
You're smarter than that one. I'll have to be careful next time.
Keri opened her eyes. You're not making any sense. Please, if you're going to kill me, at least let me know why. The nurse stood for a moment, contemplating her response, then said,
Okay, I'll explain. But then you die.
Keri, in her weariness, knew she was defeated, so she just shrugged. Whatever. The nurse reached up with her left hand and grabbed the balaclava to which the gore-splattered mask was affixed and pulled it from her head. What Keri saw only deepened her confusion, her fatalism. The nurse tossed the mask aside and said, "That corpse on the table is a clone, and so are you." Full understanding flooded into Keri's mind. It was so quick, so powerful that she had to lean against the table containing her dead clone. She remembered waking up in this very lab, looking into the eyes of the woman who stood before her. She remembered the woman leading her to the office upstairs, then giving her a sedative via injection. Keri looked back at the corpse, then back at the nurse. Then, what are you? I am the original. I am Dr. Keri Bramlett, and I created you and that corpse over there. She was just a mindless animal who ran on instinct and emotion. That's what you were supposed to be. But you are different. You somehow have memories. I can't explain it, and it's quite amazing. But I created you to earn my redemption. I'll have to be careful not to injure your brain. I want to study it, try to understand why you have my memories. You're sick, Keri said. And even though she knew that it seemed crazy, it was true. She was a clone of the insane woman who stood before her. The nurse frowned and her eyes narrowed. No, I am not. I am not sick. I didn't want to kill anyone but the clones. I gave the staff the weekend off. I didn't know they were here, and they saw me preparing for the hunt. They saw me sedate you in the office and watched as I put on my uniform. Then, when I saw them sneaking about, I had no choice but to hunt them, kill them to keep my secret. Then, that damned Jensen showed up, surprising me. So I sedated him and tied him up and threw him in the closet until I could get control of the situation. I really didn't want to kill my fiancé, but he forced me to. Keri remembered that the maid kept saying, "It's you," when they fought. The maid figured out you had created clones and were murdering them. Yes, the nurse said, and so did Steve. I thought you were going to figure it all out when she kept saying that it was you, the stupid bitch. You still haven't told me why you've done all this, Keri said. For the briefest of moments, the nurse frowned. A pained look softened her eyes. To get rid of my guilt, she said. Then, as if the mere idea of guilt offended her, she grimaced. Her eyes darkened with hate. What guilt? Keri asked. The nurse sneered. I am a genius among geniuses, and I have found the solution to the problem. What problem? Keri said when the nurse hesitated to continue. The biggest problem to ever confront humanity, the nurse said. Stupid people. They are everywhere. They breed, creating more stupid people. The world belongs to people like me, the elite, not the unwashed hoi polloi. I have created a virus that will thin the herd of humanity. I have the cure, and only I get to choose who will receive it. Only the healthiest, the strongest, the smartest will live. Only the worthy will remain. And that is how it should be. That's how it should be, Keri thought. What gives her the right? Keri's memory was growing by the moment. She now knew enough to realize the scope of the nurse's genocide. Billions will die. The nurse closed her eyes, clearly dealing with an internal struggle. I know. but it's necessary. I'm creating utopia." Keri had thought she could not further be stunned, but she was wrong. The nurse was going to murder billions of people just to create her own twisted idea of utopia. "Then why all this?" Keri asked, pointing to the corpse on the table. "Why clone yourself? Why the costume?" The nurse snorted. "I know what I'm doing is the right thing, but I'm miserable. I am consumed by guilt. I hope that somehow all this will help me find redemption." Keri finally understood, and with that knowledge came a righteous anger. "You want to die, don't you? But you're too arrogant, too weak to commit suicide. So you cloned yourself just so you can kill the clone? You're putting your guilt onto the clone like some modern scapegoat, hoping that by murdering your clone you can forgive yourself for what you're about to do. You have to know that this warped idea of redemption will never work." The nurse frowned again, then squinted her eyes in anger. "It has to. It's all I have. I'm doing what I can to earn my redemption." "You're insane," Keri said. "None of that is even remotely logical. You're an elitist bitch who knows you've done an evil thing, but you can't bring yourself to do what's right. So instead you come up with this as a solution? Murdering a clone of yourself doesn't bring redemption for the evil you've done. It never will." "Maybe not," the nurse said. "But it does make me happy because it's so much fun." The nurse sprang into action, charging Keri, raising the bone saw, preparing to slash. Everything Keri had learned filled her with a righteous anger. The anger was like a cleansing fire, burning away her weariness, numbness, and her misplaced guilt. She was invigorated as energy surged through her, and she knew that she must survive. She knew without any doubt that she would regain most, if not all, of the nurse's memories, and that she could use that knowledge to try to find a cure for the disease that the nurse had unleashed onto the world. Keri dodged as the nurse slashed, missing her by the merest fraction of an inch. Keri snatched a beaker that was half filled with amber liquid. She turned and splashed the contents at the nurse's face. "Damn you!" the nurse yelled and began wiping at her eyes. "That burns, you bitch!" Keri saw this as an opportunity. She rushed in with the empty beaker held high and smashed it down on the nurse's head. It shattered. Sharp fragments glittered in the air and tinkled to the floor. The nurse grunted, but slashed out with the bone saw. Keri twisted away, but not fast enough. The tip of the blade sliced through her hip. The blade was so sharp that Keri did not at first realize she'd been cut. She only realized her wound when she felt hot blood pour down her leg. Keri still held the neck of the beaker, which ended in a jagged shard. She tried to step in closer and stab the nurse, but the nurse brought the blade back around, forcing Keri to jump back. The nurse rushed, slashing the blade back and forth. Keri turned to run and crashed into the table containing the laptop. She snatched a laptop and threw it at the nurse, causing her to dodge to the left, slowing her down. That allowed Keri to put the table between them. Still holding the broken beaker in her right hand, she used her left hand to reach for a scalpel that was lying on the table. The nurse snatched Keri's wrist and with surprising strength drug her up onto the table. Keri tried to yank her wrist free, but the nurse was too strong, had too tight a grip. She lay across the table on her stomach, her back exposed to the nurse's blade. The nurse raised the bone saw and brought it down, a victorious smile on her face. But Keri saw the perfect opening. She used her free right hand and plunged the jagged end of the beaker into the nurse's stomach. The nurse gasped in surprise, and her eyes shot wide. The shock did not stop her from bringing the bone saw down. She had been aiming to plunge the knife into Keri's back, between the ribs and through her heart. But the shock of having 6 inches of jagged glass rammed into her stomach threw off her aim. The saw sliced through the flesh of Keri's left shoulder, and when the tip hit the steel table, the blade twisted from the nurse's weakened grip. Keri screamed, not in fear, but in rage. She twisted onto her back, and the nurse lost her grip on her wrist. Keri let go of the beaker, which was still stuck deep into the nurse's stomach, and quickly pushed herself up onto her knees. She grabbed the bone saw, lifted it high, and brought it down with all her might and rage into the nurse's chest. It was so sharp that it plunged deep, cleaving ribs and piercing her heart. Frothy blood bubbled up and onto the nurse's lips as she gurgled. "What? I'm too important to die." Keri grimaced, eye to eye with her original self, as crazy as that sounded, and watched as the nurse looked with surprise at the bone saw sticking out of her chest. Then, with blood pouring from her mouth, she whispered, "This makes me sad." And she collapsed to the floor. Keri sat on top of the table for a long time, shaking, numb, cold. After what seemed an eternity, she regained her composure, forced her trembling hands to steady, and she slid off the table. She took stock of her wounds, noticing that they were not debilitating nor life-threatening. She bandaged them as well as she could with supplies from the lab's first aid kit, and walked over to the other clone lying on the steel table. She looked down at the body. She was not sure if the nurse had told the truth about this clone being mindless, running only on instinct, but she still treated the body with respect. She noticed the table had wheels, and she pushed it over to the cremation chamber. She took a few minutes to recall how to maneuver the body into the unit, noticing that the memory seemed to be coming more easily. She then dragged the body of the nurse, her original, to the cremation chamber, and with some effort hoisted her inside. She shut the door and turned her attention to cleaning up the mess, which took only 20 minutes. She stood with her back to the elevator doors, surveying the lab, wondering about the amazing advancement of technology and understanding that had occurred here, and how it had been used for evil instead of for good. Keri was horrified that the nurse had unleashed her utopian plague into the world with the intention of killing mothers, fathers, children. She was feeling more confident she would gain most, if not all, of her original's memories and knowledge. What did not completely return, she would regain by reading the original secret files stored on her personal computer hidden in a wall safe in this very lab. The pain in her arm from where the maid had stabbed her, and in her shoulder and hip, intensified now that her adrenaline had diminished. She knew she needed medical attention, but first, she needed to deal with the bodies of Jensen, the maid, and Steve. She stepped into the elevator and crafted a believable story. She would say that an intruder had broken in and killed them, and that after she fought back, the intruder had escaped. She recalled the sheriff's name, Mosley, and knew her original did not trust him because he was smart, a good investigator and reader of people. The nurse feared him, but Keri would not, though she hoped her story would be believable. She remembered that the town of Nevermore and its surrounding land was a place where many strange and terrible things happened almost daily. That memory gave her hope that her story would hold up to scrutiny. She may look like the original, may be regaining her memories, but she was not the same person. And from this point on, Keri vowed she would humble herself and serve humanity instead of being an elitist bent on genocide. And that is as it should be.